Welcome into another installment of Jake and Joshua, where we sound off on some of the biggest topics in Big Ten football. Wanted to talk to you about this one, the game before the game. Ohio State and Michigan both have a game coming up this weekend, obviously without the stakes on the line that they're going to have in a couple weeks. I would say that Michigan's game seems to be a little bit tougher against Illinois, although they have taken a step back over the last couple of weeks. Ohio State has a Maryland team that played really well early on. Dangerous weapons, have not looked like the team that they were at the beginning of the year. From a player's perspective, from a coach's perspective, how do you approach the game before the game?
You should operate the same every single week. Now that's not
Hold on,
always.
well, now let me push back on that. So weeks 1 through 11 should be the same as week 12 for Ohio State and Michigan?
Yes.
I disagree.
But here's the thing, though. It should be. You don't want to go out there and start trying you should have tailored that, dialed in your process and your battle rhythm throughout the whole year. But then we all know when it's Ohio State, Michigan week, the dial gets turned up a little
So
bit.
then it's not the same.
Yeah, it is. Structurally speaking, it's the same. You still have your practice, you still have your meetings, but you may stay a little bit later. You may go a little bit harder. You may practice with a little bit more anger. You should always go 100%, but we all know the focus is turned up a little bit.
I'm gonna
we
throw
got to
something
stay
out
on
here.
the topic here.
No,
We're talking
just,
the week before the week.
This is good. I'm gonna throw something out here real quick.
All right.
You got Thanksgiving, so how
That
is
is
it even
point.
the same?
Okay, that's a good point. You're right.
We're off topic.
Maturity matters in both instances. To say that you aren't aware of what next week is, meaning the week after this week, would be a flat out lie. Everybody knows it. But at this point, the rivalry's clearly back, and there's heavy stakes on this game. But that doesn't matter if either team loses this week. So they understand they got to go out there and play their best ball. What I think is interesting is the matchups. I think both teams are essentially looking in a mirror. What Michigan wants to do is what Illinois wants to do.
Yes.
What Illinois does is not what Ohio State does.
Right.
Meanwhile, Maryland plays a very similar style to Ohio State. Michigan does not. So neither of these weeks is going to fully prepare you for next week. Nothing prepares you for next week. You got to go out there and handle business. And then the number one thing is stay healthy.
Sure.
Get healthy and stay healthy. Both teams have injuries in key positions. I'd love for both teams to be at full health when they play each other the following week.
Yeah, I'm with you on the health piece for sure. Like, when I was a player, I didn't want to feel like there was a reason that anybody could cheapen a win over my rival by saying, oh, such and such wasn't in the game plan, they weren't fully healthy. And I think the game's going to be way better if both teams are at full strength. But you touched on the fact that you can't overlook an opponent. Everybody knows what's coming. And it's interesting to me because if you're either one of these coaches, there's no chance you're overlooking this week because everybody is talking about the fact that you could stub your toe. And I think both of those coaches are hyper aware, and they've got mature teams who have handled business up to this point when things could have fallen off the rails. So it's good there. But you mentioned a tune-up and working on things so you can be at your best when you're playing in that rivalry game. As you evaluate either one of these teams, what are the biggest things they need to work on?
I mean, Michigan, the way they run the football it's like watching Vincent Van Gogh paint. It's beautiful. It's unbelievable. And teams know it's happening, but they're just so methodical in their ability to run the ball. But the ceiling is just limited until they start hitting some of these downfield shots. And I say that because I think they're fully capable of it. I think JJ is extremely talented. I think Ronnie Bell, Cornelius, Roman Wilson, they can stretch the field. Getting Schoonmaker back, I don't know if he'll be back this week, but he's a weapon at tight end. If they can hit some shots, in the game, you need to play 100%, and you usually need something to bounce in your favor to win. For Ohio State, I think it's the exact opposite. Michigan, when you look at what Michigan does, their ability to rush the passer is how you would stop Ohio State's offense. You don't go toe-to-toe and say we're going to stop Marvin Harrison Jr. throughout 60 minutes.
Right.
You got to make C.J. Stroud uncomfortable in the pocket. So that comes down to Ohio State's O-line and their ability to run the ball, which would slow down the pass rush.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you. I think Ohio State has certainly looked better running it this year than they did a year ago. They lack consistency.
And so it's the injuries too, right?
I know. It's been they haven't had
not making
their
excuses,
top
it's
dogs.
reality.
Well, but it is reality though. But if it comes down to the case that they don't have both those guys to roll, they just got to roll with what they have. So they need to be able to do that with consistency. And your point about Michigan's throw game, this is a game where we have seen it's the explosive play. So if they can hit all of their home runs running the football, and that's how they have done it this year, like, more power to you. But Ohio State has improved on the defensive side. They have not seen a rushing attack, anything like what the Wolverines have. But if Ohio State can be efficient in their first down defense and stopping the run, then you're going to have to be able to hit some of those plays over the top, and especially if they start drawing that extra safety to the box, you got to take advantage of one-on-ones.
I want to talk to you. I want to go back to this specific week before the previous week, and maybe it's something true for the whole season. So when you go through practice, it's a scripted practice. They hey, here's our third down period. We're going to operate our third downs. Then the scout offense is going to show what the current opponent would do on third down. Hey, this is our run period. Here's our play action pass. You have periods to practice every situation throughout the week. And for Michigan, you're symbolizing Illinois this week. For Ohio State, your scout team's representing Maryland this week. But I think, and the players should never know this, but I think what coaches have been doing is they're exactly starting to build in without players knowing a little bit of Ohio State plays, a little bit of Michigan plays. And you don't know it. You still are. That way the players are all focused on the game, but you just want to touch that throughout the year, and you have to, and it's a respect to both programs.
So I know Ohio State does a period that they call the Team Up North period in practice, where like every day they'll just stop down and they only do what Michigan does for that singular period, 5 or 10 minutes a day, just to make sure they're getting the work and that the rivalry is being emphasized. I know that Michigan is probably doing a similar thing.
Theirs is 9-on-7. The inside run drill, they call it OSU drill or whatever.
So and so that's what you get. But there are also those scenarios, and Luke Fickell, who is my defensive coordinator at Ohio State, told me after we were getting ready to play somebody who might have been Michigan State or Penn State, a good team, and the week before that, the scout team was running a lot of their plays, but he never told us that. And then after, he told us what was going on.
And you didn't even know.
No,
it,
we
right?
didn't.
Yeah.
But that's something that happens because you have to constantly work on the things, especially if Michigan has a concept that Ohio State has a deficiency in, they need to work on that every single practice leading up to that game. So it makes sense from a game plan standpoint, but these coaches try to find an edge anywhere.
You need to put it on practice the week before the game.
Yep.
So the coaches can evaluate.
They have time.
And then the next week they'll be able to adjust it. Exactly. It's a lot. It happens quick in the week of the game.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. I'm very curious to see how either of these teams come out this week and handle their business, because that will show me more about these teams than anything else. Is like, this is a big maturity week, not just to go out there and to win a football game, but to execute with few mistakes, to be fully engaged with the game plan, knowing what's coming in a couple of Saturdays.
Yeah.
It's time we talk about it. The mess in the West. Now, a couple weeks ago, we were sitting in here talking about how Illinois was in the driver's seat, and we were excited to see what their finish could look like. And
a couple weeks before that, Minnesota.
Yeah. And
Purdue,
Iowa didn't necessarily go the way that the Illini would have planned it. And now we're sitting in here where 2 weeks before the end of the regular season, nobody in the West controls their own destiny. Simply, what do you make of this?
It's absolute madness. It's great, though, in a sense that, at the end of it, for all you can ask for is a shot in the game of football, right? It's just so hard. If you told any one of these teams that's in the race, hey, with 2 games to play, you have a shot at this. You got to play your best football, and you have a potential to knock on the door and get to Indy. They take it. Now with the context of where some of these teams had the chance to fully grasp it, it obviously doesn't look as pretty. But I think as you look at these last 2 games, you can't, as a coaching staff, as a program, it's cliche to say this, you can't worry about anything else. It's like controlling the controllables. Can you play your absolute best football for 60 minutes 2 weeks in a row?
But
that's all you can ask.
The controlling the controllables part is where I think it's a really iffy spot to be, because everybody else they're depending on somebody else to slip up too. So I could be in a scenario where I do all of the things that I'm supposed to do, and I still don't know what the outcome could be. That is a very difficult spot to be in as a program, as a player, simply because you're being tested in your maturity, and we know that these teams have slipped up, every single one of them. They have deficiencies that have sometimes gotten the best of them. Mm-hmm. Their strengths haven't always shown through. Like, that's the part to me where this is a very interesting scenario, is I can play a full 60 minutes of my best ball and still know that it might not be enough because I have to wait for somebody else to mess up.
If it's raining outside, I can't control that, but I can put on rain boots and a rain jacket, right? Like, I can control that aspect of it.
But you can still get wet, though.
You can still get wet.
Sure.
That's
what I'm saying.
Maturity keeps coming up, though, and I it's something that I'm shocked how little it gets talked about in college football.
Dude, it's huge. It's one of the...
You're 18 to 22 years old. Yes. Life's coming at you fast. Yes. Now NIL.
Yes.
Now
it's one of the biggest variables in the sport. To me, I think maturity can take teams as far as anything else.
When do you know your team is mature? When do you know your locker room is mature?
I think you have an idea of it when you head into training camp personally. I think the way that teams handle spring ball, the way that teams handle summer workouts, I think that shows you
education,
yes,
showing up to class,
all that stuff.
Getting grades, yeah.
That is the big maturity. And it's not to say that your team can't evolve over the season, but I think if you have a mature group, you know it pretty early on.
And I think maturity is a variable that plays silently a huge factor in a team's success. Mm-hmm. And for any of these teams in the race, the most mature team that can handle the moment. I mean, these will be challenging games for most teams. There's going to be moments in these games where there's a fork in the road and you're going to have to respond and execute or throw in the towel and now you just eliminated yourself. Maturity is the big reason you'll succeed or fail.
Yeah, this is, it's wild. Because I had not anticipated that we would be in this specific situation, especially the way Illinois came on. We knew at the beginning of the year that this thing was going to be wide open, and we knew that there was going to be an opportunity probably for a team who had not been to Indy yet to go there from the West. And those ideas are still alive. It's just wild how we got to this point.
Yeah, it's I'm still stuck on this word maturity, and I just think that's one of the most beautiful things about football. It's an opportunity to talk about football as a teacher of life, too. There's only going to be one person that goes to Indy, one team that goes to Indy. There's going to be three that are going to be heartbroken. You know, obviously the whole West will be heartbroken outside of that. But that can be a great teacher for programs. And in the West, there's a lot of teams knocking on the ceiling, that, especially this year, but in history, they're knocking on the ceiling. Going forward, who can break through that ceiling? You know, it's up for grabs for someone to be the dominant team in the West of the next decade.
We'll just have to wait and see, because it seems like nobody wanted to take control this year, which is perfectly fine because we're going to get some really fun football games for these last couple of weeks. I'm certainly going to enjoy it. I'm going to mostly enjoy talking about it. If anybody asks me about tiebreaker scenarios, I'm going to tell them I have no idea. I'm not that smart. That's why I played football. But this is like I keep saying, interesting is probably the best word. And I think maturity is going to be the key for these last couple of weeks for some of these teams. But as always,
looking forward to it.
Jay Buns, appreciate you.